I've been gardening for 3-4 years now, and food is one of the most important things that we take the time to pursue in our human life. And it's simple, but it's energizing and fulfilling, and it changes the trajectory of your whole life, because what you put in your body is what you get out. And people have consistently showed how it's possible to heal themselves with food, and people have also consistently showed how it's possible to hurt themselves with food. While this process of understanding the life cycle of plants and gardening has been something that I've honed in on and learned a lot about, and I feel very confident in at this point, the thing that I haven't been able to really nail down to is really providing enough food for my family from the actual land that we're growing on. This year, I am really honing in on getting down to the nitty-gritty of gardening for sustenance. This is coming from a place for me of saying that I love how I feel when I am dominantly eating food from the land that I live on. And I love how I feel being able to eat food that I can trust has not had anything done to it from a chemical perspective, but also from an energetic perspective. This year, I decided I was tired of the step-by-step small progress that I had been making in really sustaining the family for food. I really want to quantum leap into the perspective of saying I am providing the vegetable needs for the family. I got to looking around a little bit on the interwebs and looking at, okay, if I really want to get down to the nitty-gritty of this situation, what are other people saying? And there's some really great information out there from people who've been homesteading for a long time about growing what you eat, and about really making a good plan and a good crop plan to sufficiently provide for the family that you have. I thought that there was a lot of really valuable tools in that, but there was like a missing piece, because a lot of times the narrative around supplying the food that you need for your family from the land that you live on comes from a space of necessity. And I will time and time again come to this space to say we are here to thrive, not survive. And for me, I needed to change the narrative of what it felt like to grow enough food for the family from a space of thriving. And so I'm going to talk you through how I am making this plan, taking what has been given from the knowledgeable folks who are already really deeply into the process of homesteading, and I'm going to kind of apply my lens of thriving, not surviving. So this is how I'm breaking this down. There's a really practical lens that you take this from, and then there's also kind of that more energetic lens to step into in this process that I'm going to talk you through, because I think that's the very first thing that you have to do in order to really appreciate the process of understanding what you need to grow. When I think about thriving in a self-sufficient way, and I think about thriving, not surviving by interconnecting with the land, I'm thinking about how I feel when I'm eating, and I think about how I create a life of my definition of self-sufficiency so that I feel aligned in what I'm doing and I feel grateful for the process as well as the outcome. For me, the first step in this whole process, I had to sit down and I had to close my eyes and I had to imagine from the space of when I feel my absolute best, when I feel energetic, when I feel balanced in my hormones, when I feel like my skin is glowing, when I have strong nails and hair, when I have a great mindset and a positive outlook on life, what do my meals look like in that time? Because that's what I'm going for. from that space of sitting and imagining and feeling into all of those experiences that I've had before, then I made an ideal meal plan. And one of the resources that I felt was really helpful in the process of the ideal meal plan for me was the 6 Seasons cookbook by Joshua McFadden. Oof, I don't remember. Josh McFadden. 6 Seasons cookbook. Highly recommend. And just the premise of that book to say there's 4 seasons as far as most of the world is concerned, but to the home cook who really wants to appreciate what seasonality is in the land and what seasonality is in the foods that are available to us, there's 6 seasons. So for me, I had to create a meal plan that had 6 seasons. And so I just kind of drafted up an ideal day of eating for 6 different times of year where different products are coming out of the garden, and those products taste different and need to be prepared differently depending on how warm it is outside, or depending on if it's meant to be coming from a storage crop or if it's meant to be coming from an unstored crop. And so things like that, where this book really helped me kind of paint that picture. And then I had to also understand that for my own wellness and my own well-being, there are foods that help me and there are foods that don't. And so that whole kind of concept where you like hear the conversation of like, grow what your family eats is like, yes, because of the need to thrive, not survive. So grow in bounty what your family feels so good eating, and get excited about the prospect of being able to do that. I know that that looks different for everybody, but for me, this was kind of that unfurling process of just figuring out what to grow to really allow the family to thrive. I'm going to repeat that again and again and again and again and again. If you get tired of hearing thrive, you got to go somewhere else, because that is what we are doing here when we are talking about a self-sufficient life. And on the premise of self-sufficiency, there was kind of also the conversation that I needed to have with myself to say, okay, I know how to eat to make me feel really good, but there's the process of making this sustainable in the other way, which is I don't really want to do something that's going to completely drain me energetically. Gardening's such a spiritual practice for me already, and I learned so much from taking time to observe the land that I really wouldn't want to do anything to compromise something that gives me so much energy in life already. As I sit with earth and as I sit and intermingle with the process of really deepening the relationship that I have with earth, the thing that I had to understand is that self-sufficiency is kind of defined differently for everybody. So I wrote down what I felt like for me were the parameters of self-sufficiency that I really wanted to experience. For me, it's feeding the family from the land we live on. And that's a really basic, general, broad scope, but it's dominant majority of the calories that we consume coming from the land we live on. The second thing that I've kind of spoken to was build a thriving body with diverse nutrients and colors. So pursue the rainbow in the process of growing. Sometimes you have to compromise high yielding crops that are all the same color for crops that provide you different antioxidant ratios, but that maybe lower the volume of food that you get. The final 2 parameters for defining self-sufficiency in my life are really, after I have grown a crop, I want to be able to do it again. And for me, being able to do it again means saving seed and being able to perpetuate really amazing genetics. And then finally, I really feel the value in growing my medicine cabinet, because the best medicine is already all around us and has already been here for thousands of years. And we get to be part of a generation that gets to appreciate that more than we have in a long time. And for me, I would so much rather open a medicine cabinet to herbs and to remedies that smell amazing and that have color and that elicit a different experience just depending on what I need, and building that intuition relationship with the earth. That's medicine. And it comes from how we choose to support the really intricate immune system that we have and the really intricate hormones that we have and this really wonderful mechanism that we get to live in and be in this world in, and this microbiome that we get to share this wonderful body with. And so as I looked at kind of that process of self-sufficiency, those were the 4 parameters that I was like, okay, this is equally as important to me as just buying seeds and growing food and putting it on a plate. It almost was a deterring thing when I looked at my definition of self-sufficiency to say, how am I going to really do this? I have a really hard time staying attentive to a task like this because I love being outside and I need that like tangible, visceral experience to be motivated to continue a process. So this part is hard, and that's okay. If it's hard for you, it's okay. Just keep trying. Just keep going. You got it. After I did the process of saying, okay, I know how it feels to thrive, and I know what foods make me feel good, and I created a basic menu plan and said, oh my gosh, in an ideal day of eating, this is what this would look like. And then I defined the process in a way that said, okay, I don't know exactly how this is going to look, but I know what I need to make this process something that I'm going to want to continue to do by defining my self-sufficiency parameters and saying, this is really the goals that I am aspiring to, and this is how I want it to feel, and this is how I want it to look. So having those parameters kind of under an umbrella of this planning period of creating a really actual self-sufficient garden was really a great foundation for me to set up into the next phase. After you've got that energetic understanding of these things, it's time to kind of get more into the nitty gritty. And this is where I have kind of taken that next step. I wrote a list. I wrote a list of every vegetable I could possibly think of wanting to enjoy every day. And I broke it into 3 different categories. I broke it into my warm weather crops, the things that I grow in the summertime, my cool weather crops, the things that I grow in the wintertime, and my perennials. At first I was kind of thinking that that wouldn't be a helpful thing for people because everybody lives in such a different climate and you can grow different things different times a year depending on where you are. But even people that live in the coldest climates have really, if they want something, people have shown that it's possible to make it happen. And through some ingenuity and creative design, you can have a year-round garden no matter where you are. So it may look a little different for you depending on where you are as far as like what you choose to grow when, but for the most part, I think it's pretty tangible. And so I put it into a doc and I kind of created 4 different categories in the document. And I said, okay, this is the plant. This is how much I eat for fresh eating. This is how much I eat for preserving every year. This is how much I consume as far as like my family goes. And this is how much the plant produces per plant. And then given that those parameters are set in place, this is how much I need to plant. So those are my 4 categories: fresh eating, preserving, how much is produced per plant in an average situation, and then how much do I need to plant. Given the new setting and the new clothes, you could see it's a new day, but the conversation around growing food, enough food to feed our families, is not done. So I'm going to take you into my garden, because the thing that we talked about when we were leading up to the process of creating a garden that will actually feed your family is really half of the equation. You need to be armed with the knowledge of what is required for basic numbers on planting so that you can start prioritizing what is going to be the things that you are really going to grow. Because as I made this doc where I said, this is how much I need to plant of each thing to feed my family, and then I looked in my space, I realized, no, there is a reason that the farming model became what it was. And it's not something that I want to support. I don't like industrial farming, and I love biodiversity in my own space, and I love choosing to provide for my family. But what is really important is that choosing to prioritize certain crops that you can grow in your space well allows you to reach into your community and find those that are willing to exchange, trade, barter, so that you can expand your access to food that you feel good about without having to do everything yourself. Because the truth is, nobody ever did that. Self-sufficiency is not doing it yourself. And historically speaking, that's not how it worked. It's always been something that is deeply rooted in community. And the whole conversation of growing your own food can't happen without having this part of the conversation. Your participation in your community and your ability to support and be supported by your community is how self-sufficiency really starts to show a functioning model that will work. This space that I am building out is a little over 2,000 square feet. That's not even a quarter acre. For 2 people, I can meet the needs of a lot of our crops with a well-managed 2,000 square foot space. I'm still building this garden, so obviously that's not happening yet. But even as such, when you start looking at consumption of perennial crops and the requirements and spacing for trees, for the more sustaining foods such as nuts and seeds, plus herbs, plus flowers for pollination, plus all of these things, 2,000 square feet is enough to meet 80% of the vegetable needs of my family for fresh eating consistently, as well as some preservation, with my current capacity to grow what I grow and my ability to nourish and water plants that allow them to thrive. For example, this year I planted a 40-foot row of peas, shelling peas. And they are really happy. They're almost done. They're kind of getting to the point where it's getting too warm for them. And in this 40-foot row of shelling peas that I have here, I did a pretty good job at creating a space where they could thrive and grow to well over 6 feet tall. They're setting a really fair amount of fruit, and I've been picking from these plants for a month. I've been picking from these plants, but right now is their peak production. I am going to get maybe 5 meals from this plot, from this space right here, of a dish, like a pasta dish with peas and carrots and all of these delicious things. But it took up a pretty substantial part of my garden to plant out those peas. And they will be followed up with long beans and cucumbers and other items that will continue to allow the season to progress. But if I was looking at a survival situation, 5 meals seems a little disconcerting. I don't want to go too far off on a tangent of the definition and the philosophy of the self-sufficient model. But the reason that I'm bringing this up is because when you make your list, you're going to get overwhelmed because that feels insurmountable when you just make a list of what you eat and how much you consume as a human. Humans are pretty inefficient at digesting food. We eat a lot compared to our body weight, you know, and we haven't even gotten the conversation about protein, but as far as vegetables go, humans eat a lot. And especially if growing kids or, you know, teenagers, like you're putting food out. And it's going to feel that whole bliss moment that you get of, I feel empowered to do this process is going to, that's our first block. After we've imagined, you know, our ideal eating and we've imagined the process of growing what we really want to feel good consuming and being able to create that experience for ourselves, that's like the empowering moment, and it gives you the motivation to launch into action. And then you do an analysis and you get like that first block of like, this is going to require so much more than I thought. It's okay, because the next thing that you're doing is you're coming out to your space where you think you want to grow your food, and you're going to re-empower yourself. And this is how you're going to do it. You're going to look at the space that you have, and you're going to say, how do I make this experience something that I want to keep doing again and again and again and again and again? Because it's like laundry. This just, you show up every day. And you come out and you look at your space and you say, well, I have this space and this is how much I need of these products, and I really want to be self-sufficient and I really want to grow all these things and I don't know how I'm going to fit all of it in here. Pick your favorite 5 foods that you think taste so much better when you eat them fresh that it is worth whatever is required to make them grow at home. Start there. Just 5 items. And then the bug will hit you and you'll figure out how to expand it and everything will work out, and you'll learn that you have more seasonality and that you can go in and replace crops more consistently and more frequently, and that there's some things that you can maybe tuck into a nook here or work there, and you get into companion planting, and then you realize like gardening is a process of diversity and it's a process of creativity, and that this self-sufficient mindset is only going to take you so far, and that your motivation to continue to create really delicious food for your family is also going to come from the joy of how you get to create your space. And as you go through the process and you create the doc of really understanding how much food your family eats, go out into your space, look at it for a little while, and then you say, these are the 5 things that I am going to grow this year, and I am going to plant enough of these 5 things to feed my family. And then after I've done that, we can have the conversation around what else I'm going to put in my garden. But I'm going to prioritize these 5 things this year. And that will give you just a little bit of breathing room so that you can go into the next step. I think this is a really good place to kind of say, okay, the next step is really a whole nother video. So I will continue to provide my experience on expanding the self-sufficiency of our family's food. And as more videos come out, we will talk more about what the process of maximizing your harvest looks like when you're actually growing food, because a lot of people say this, and I've heard it proven to be true. Sometimes a very well maintained and well nurtured smaller garden is more productive than a bigger garden. And I think once you start getting into the process of wanting to expand your own production, the dilemma of space is going to come up a lot. But getting creative about how you're using your space is the first step. And then having the conversation about creating bigger spaces is kind of the second step. So in the next round, we'll talk about getting creative on how to use your space in order to maximize the productivity of the crops that you want to prioritize growing for the season. And then we will expand from there. I look forward to continuing to show you how I'm creating self-sufficiency in my space. And I am really grateful that you're here. So tune in for the next one and stay well in the process.